everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle, and this is a show where we talk all things parenting. And we've done a lot of episodes talking about bullying, but when I was talking to another mom recently, she was telling me that her biggest problem was actually just everyday conflicts. And I think we've all had that experience with our kids where they come home from school and they say that their friend suddenly said something like, "You can't play with us." Or maybe there's some teen drama that plays out with your kid getting really hurt feelings. So there's a fine line of when to jump in and also how to guide them to solve the conflict on their own. In a few minutes, we're going to talk with Dr. Kim Bell, a clinical child psychologist, about what to say and how to help your kids. But first, joining me today is my fellow mom and colleague, Danielle Wiggins, who we end up talking about this a lot when we're sitting next to each other, how to guide these kids on how to do it. And we've talked, this is kind of ponying off of last week's episode where we talked about when your kids don't get along with your best friend's kids. And we've all had that situation, but do you have instances when your kids come home and it's that minor conflict of like so-and-so said something that offended them, or maybe they're, not hanging out with what was their BFF of the moment?
Right. Yes, I've had multiple incidents with both of my children who are, one's a teenager, one's preteen, and I had to figure out when to step in. I think for one that was my son, he was in middle school at the time, and I think I let it go too far in terms of it was like, it was kind of like bullying in sense of a kid will like hit him on the back of the head, and he's like, "Stop it," and he would tell me, and it really frustrated him, and I wanted to let him handle it, and see what he was going to say, but then it kept escalating, and I got on the phone with my friend who is, she's a counselor, and I was talking, I was like, when do you step in? This was very conversation. And as I'm sitting out on the porch, I hear my son yelling and screaming at another kid, and they are about to get into a physical altercation. And so I was like, that's when I'm supposed to step in. So and that taught me when it came to my daughter, and you got the preteen, issues with other girls at school. And, I saw one time some girls came to our house, and then all of a sudden my daughter disappeared after she came in from talking with them, and she was hiding in a closet. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with her? She's crying, and she didn't want to tell us what happened. And we had to give her like an entire evening. And then we said, okay, you don't have to go. We let her stay home from school because she was so distraught. And then she finally told us of what happened. Actually, I had to call another parent and say, hey, your daughter was here. What happened? And that parent ended up telling me everything. And then my daughter was able to, open up, and I was able to step in then. But sometimes you have to really think of, don't wait too late to step in, because it could really escalate quickly. And
I feel like it's also age dependent too. When your kids are little, of course you're gonna step in and help them or talk to the other parent. But then, like, when is that age boundary of no, mom, don't step in anymore, like I don't want you getting in the middle, but then you naturally mama bear, and you want to make sure that your kid doesn't get hurt. And I feel like there's always that question of I want to make sure that they don't get hurt, but then I also want them to learn, even at a young age, how to solve this on their own.
And it also is like the temperament of your kids as well, because like my oldest will come home and tell me everything. This will happen, this person got on my nerves, but then my younger, who's my daughter, she's a closed book. And so I have to really play like investigator and like what is going on. I have to watch her moods, watch her mental stability to see if something has shifted, because I will ask over and over and over again, and she will not tell me if she's in a conflict.
What's funny is even right after I did this, and you're right, like some kids are very open, some kids just don't tell you. And my oldest is very open, and I did this interview, went home, and my oldest, who's 9, she was in a volleyball camp, and she started telling me, Mom, this girl told me that she cut in front, or I cut in front of her, and then she was telling all the other girls that I'm mean, and I go, I'm like, I still like don't know exactly how to handle it. You know, and I was telling her some of the advice that Dr. Bell gave me, but it's those little things. I mean, it happens throughout life. How many times have we been standing in the grocery store and somebody like cuts in front of us and it's like, do I say something or do I not? Like conflicts, it happens every day, all day long, but when it's a kid, you want to teach them the right way to handle it. So Dr. Kim Bell always has great advice on these topics. This is what she had to say. So there's a difference between conflict resolution and bullying. And so today I want to talk about, like, well, there's, and I think that we focus a lot about bullying, but there's those little squabbles that kids come home with every day where it was, so-and-so said they couldn't play with me, or like even on the teen side, you know, I was left out and, you know, my friends all went to wherever and then they left me behind. How do you coach a kid through conflict resolution?
Okay, that's an excellent one. Because we have to always keep in mind what our job is as parents. What is the actual job of a parent? Your job is to bring a human being into the world and do the very best you can to create an adult who can function and work and be in healthy relationships and contribute to the world. That's the job, right? In a nutshell. So one of the things that is true about human beings is that we are often in conflict with each other. We have conflicts with our coworkers. We have conflicts with authority. We have conflicts. It's part of being human and living in a society. So we have to teach in the home, we have to model a form of conflict resolution. So, you know, when we talk about different types of parenting, there's authoritarian parenting, there's permissive parenting, and then right in the middle you have authoritative. And that's where we find kids most successful. The kids who are most successful grew up in a household that had a very authoritative, but not authoritarian. So my way or the highway is on this end of the spectrum. There are no rules in our house are on this end of the spectrum. We want to be in the middle. And so when you practice resolving conflict at home, then you build up a tolerance for disagreements, for this is how I feel, this is how you feel, is there a compromise? If you behave in a certain way that impacts somebody else negatively, there's a natural consequence to that, and there's a restitution that can be made. We've talked about that when you and I have talked about discipline. So first we start there. Those are the building blocks. Then we want to start with tolerating the negative behaviors or the negative feelings. Let's not talk behaviors. Then we want to tolerate negative feelings, which is being left out. Somebody doesn't want to play with me. Somebody else has a friend. And I'm feeling like I'm not the most important friend anymore. Those are all developmentally natural experiences that we have to survive. What else can you do? Okay, you weren't invited this time. I'm sure it's because of whatever their rules are and not because of you. What else can you do during this time? So we have to help them tolerate it, and I think too often we hate to see our kids in pain, and so we jump in too quickly to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's for conflict resolution. I recommend in our very busy world, if you can, to have a relationship with your kids' friends' parents so that you can, in an ideal situation, if two kids are having a conflict, you can contact that other parent and say, I think our kids are having a struggle. Not that you guys figure it out and make rules for the kids, but in a perfect world, you're getting those kids together and you're helping them to resolve it. Like, well, let's sit down and talk about what's going on.
Yeah. So when do you do that though? Because is there an age group that you can do it and then a certain point where it's like, no, you can't? Because I think that's another struggle that parents have is, when do I jump in? And you know, at what point in the conflict do I insert myself?
You know, well, first of all, younger, obviously, you can jump in sooner because they don't have the skills yet. For an older child, you know, I'll say it again, I'm very redundant. Well, what did they say when you asked? Did they want help?
Yeah.
You know, there's been a thing going around lately that I absolutely love, which is this idea that when somebody comes to you to complain, about whatever, or is having a rough feeling, that your question is, do you need me to help you fix this, or do you want me to just listen? And your teenager specifically will tell you what they need, you know, or they might say, no, I want you to fix it for me, but you can't, you know, those kinds of things. I think where I would draw the line, my line in the sand, would be if I start to see the mental health of my teenager suffering, if I start to see signs of not coming out of their room, changes in appetite, changes in sleep habits, then I would start to really worry, okay, is this a conflict or is there some bullying going on? And trying to create as much open communication as you can, because bullying I don't tolerate. Bullying, I will say to a child, very like, this is the line. And as your parent, I'm not going to allow anybody to treat you this way. Who do we need to talk to?
Right.
And oftentimes that's about going to the school, because that's where it tends to happen, unless it's happening online, in which case you have to make adjustments there.
So we've talked a lot about communication. What are some of the key words that you can teach your kids to use when that moment, they're in that moment and they're butting heads with a friend on whatever level?
Well, I think it's about teaching them. Another one of my distinctions is between arguing and fighting. I think arguing is, this is how you're making me feel, or when you do this, this is how I feel. Teaching them those I phrases to be able to communicate their feelings, but also listen to their friends' feelings. That's a big skill. Well, like a lot of adults are still working on that, especially when you get into intimate relationships. Fighting is, you've done something to hurt me, and my response is I'm going to hurt you back, and now we're just slinging arrows back and forth. There's no productivity, there's no conflict resolution in fighting. If you're going to argue, that's a part of life. And I might ask kids, like, well, how did you handle it? Tell me about the argument. And then you can coach them through, well, maybe, you know, when she said that, she was feeling really angry, and that wasn't the time for you to have that conversation. We'd have to kind of come up with some specifics, but it's about helping them to understand that other people are also allowed to have their feelings, and not everybody is going to behave or feel in a way that you think they should, and that doesn't mean they hate you.
Finally, is there an age, a sweet spot? Because I feel like that's going to be really hard for like a 5-year-old to understand, but maybe no, they get it?
We do that in our preschool. Oh yeah, that's how we manage conflict resolution in our preschool. Okay, if you want to talk about really young children, then you start with some of the basics. Is this a little mad, a medium mad, or a big mad? Like, they first have to figure out, like, okay, your brother hit you. Is that a little mad, a medium mad, or a big mad? That's a big mad. Okay, but I turn the television station. Is that a little mad, a medium mad, or a big mad? And so we help them to manage their reaction to different situations. That's for like a very young child. But no, in preschool and kindergarten, we sit kids down and say, you know, well, why don't you tell him how you felt when he kicked over your blocks? And well, it hurt my feelings. And okay, well, now what do you think you could say to make this better? And you know, I had a group of girls who were fighting over crayons, for example, and they were all crying. I mean, there was like 4 of them, and they were just crying. And at some point I simply said to them, are you guys friends? Yes. So, do you want to be friends tomorrow? Yes. Then we have to stop and find a solution. And then they managed it. Those were 4-year-olds.
I love it. I feel like adults could apply that too.
Always.
So there were a bunch of key takeaways, as you can tell with Kim Bell. She's one of those people I just wish that I had on speed dial every day. And like every situation, I want to be like, Kim, what do we do? So I think one of the biggest ones is asking your kid, so do you want me to step in? Have you ever done that with any of your kids?
Yes, it's, you know, and of course the younger, as I said earlier, is the closed book. But as she gets older, she's learning that she can trust mom and dad. She can trust us to have her best interests at heart, because we have to constantly tell her, we have your best interests at heart, trust us. And so with the same, you know, group of girls where she got into it, it was one girl that she just kept Nick, you know, they were arguing, fighting all the time, and she would come home and then she would finally tell me, yeah, and they said this and that, and I asked her, I said, hey, you know, I think that it would be helpful to have some type of mediation, you know, and she goes, I don't need that. I said, I think this will be good. And even though she's like, no, I don't need it, I said, I'm going to do it anyway. So I guess I didn't necessarily ask. I sort of told, and so I guess I didn't do it, but
but you know what?
But at least I included her in on it, and so I said, I'm going to reach out. They are going to reach out to you, and so you know, I emailed the principal because again, learning from what happened with my son, I didn't want this to escalate with the young lady, and so they did a mediation. The principal stepped in, had them both talk, and you know, it's interesting because my advice was, hey, leave that girl alone. She doesn't like you. It's okay. Sometimes you just don't get along with people. Yeah. But my daughter, she actually taught me something because what ended up happening is they had their mediation and then they just kept being friends. And I was like, well, keep your eye on her. Yeah, like, you got a friend of me over there. But it turns out that after a few months that little girl was having some problems at home and was sort of just taking it out on different people. And I was able to learn, like, wow, there's my daughter showing grace and compassion to other people and not really throwing away friendships really quickly. They got through the conflict and they're like the bestest of friends now.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I had that situation too where I didn't follow the advice. I did get involved because it was escalating. My daughter was coming home. There was one certain girl that was constantly, you know, they were button heads, we'll just put it that way. And, but it started to get physical. Yes. And so I said, do you want me to say something? Do you want me to reach out to the parents? No, Mom, no, you're gonna make it worse. I don't want her to get more physical with her. And I thought, I'm going to have to veto this decision. I have to get involved. And then I did reach out to the parents. And then this is where, if you didn't catch last week's episode, now you are in a conflict basically with another parent, and it's like how to handle that. It turned out really well, and we ended up like talking about, do they get mediation and all of that. But there are times where you do have, that is the boundary where you have to step in. And Kim talked about that with like their mental health, or if they're physically getting harmed, of course you have to step in. Or if you see, especially teens drawing back, changing their habits, because I feel like, you know, the younger kids, it might get physical, but then the real danger is the mental and confidence harm that can happen in those teenage years when it is even like a frenemy. I love that you brought up frenemy, because that seems to be the situation that we're talking about here. It's the frenemy. It's the one that can hurt you the most emotionally, and kids need guided through that.
Yeah, and I think that if you don't learn that as children, you know, as adults, I'm learning that, my goodness, people do not know how to go through conflict resolution and to move on in peace. And there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of broken relationships. So I'm looking at my children like, okay, let me model it sort of for them. Like, even if, you know, I get into a conflict with someone and they see it, which they see it a lot, and I will at least say, okay, at least here's what I did to try to make peace with that person. Now, I can't control how that person responds. Like, that person could say, I don't want you in my life no more, Danielle, and I have to respect that. Like, we had to have that conversation. But it's, for me, it's, I want my children to be able to grow into adults that will be able to have conflict peacefully, and because sometimes conflict is necessary for growth in relationships and things like that. So I don't want them to be conflict avoidant. And so, you know, it's kind of like, hey, I'm here to coach you through this. Yeah,
I'm kind of laughing because this is what we kind of started out talking about, is that there's that, the line is so fine when it comes to you know, jumping in and what to do and what to say and how to handle it. And that's what I tell my daughter all the time, is that adults still struggle with this.
Yes.
I mean, even I'm thinking of some friends who even recently got into a conflict, and I had to be like, why don't you just talk to the person, tell them how you feel.
Right.
And if kids can learn that and learn the language, like Kim was mentioning with the I feel, you're making me feel this way, and to have the confidence to go up and say to a friend, you're making me feel this way. How many times as adults do we shy away from that just because we're like, oh gosh, I don't want to start a thing.
Right.
But if you just like, if a friend ever came to me and said, you're making me feel left out, you're making me feel like, you know, you don't enjoy my company, or whatever it is.
So I would flip that a little bit, because I've heard that, like, okay, you're making me feel, and then I remember someone saying, I can't make you feel anyway.
Right.
You know, that's your responsibility.
You know what, I'm probably phrasing it wrong,
but
where it's like I feel left out when you.
Yes, there you go. Yep.
Yes, that's my exhaustion kicking in with the phrasing. Good thing
even when you were saying it, I was like, I'm getting defensive. Like, I can't make you feel Maureen.
This is why we bring Danielle in.
I'm turning away from you. Okay,
I did it. See, there you go. Lesson learned. I did it the wrong way. But teaching kids that, and as I'm talking, I'm thinking about how we need to practice that. I need to practice that in my own household, because how many times as the parent are we going, you're making me so mad today, you know, like you're not, this came up in my house the other day, you're not cleaning your room, and you're making me so mad, and I'm getting so frustrated, you know. So the way we are talking can really obviously teach them a lot.
Well, Maureen, you make me feel valued.
You allow me
There's
a good you make me feel.
Into the mom squad, you invite me into the squad.
You know what, it's so great to always have your insight, because I feel like Danielle's kids are just a touch older than mine. I'm always going to Danielle going, so what are you going through? So what am I in for? And again, these experts, they have just been so incredible, giving us their insight into the language, you know, and I think we can't hear it enough, because it is something we encounter every day. And how many times have we forgotten to say, I feel, and we say, you make me feel. I mean, I even forgot that within 30 seconds, or
That's
I did it
why grace
wrong.
and mercy is so important to everyone.
Have a little grace with all of us. Well, thank you, Danielle.
Thank you for
It's
having
always
me.
great to have you. Thank you for Kim Bell giving us her insight. Thank you for being part of the squad. You can be part of the squad in this way. Check out Mom Squad with Maureen Kyle Facebook page, because that's where you can weigh in on stories, and also let us know any questions that you want answered. And we're going to see you right here next time on Mom Squad.